There is no percentage-based income tax or property tax in biblical law. According to Walter C. Jr. Kaiser, he highlights in his analysis of the Old Testament economic system, he points out that the absence of property taxes wasn't arbitrary. It reflected the sacredness of land as a divine inheritance. Land wasn't just an asset to be taxed, it was a trust from God. Here's the tension. Modern systems have added layers of taxations, including the much debated property tax. Kaiser powerfully described property tax as a form of civil robbery. Why? Because it turns what should be permanent ownership into something temporary and conditional. Welcome back to the podcast where faith meets life. Today's episode takes us into a topic that's as old as civilization itself, and that is taxes. Yes, taxes. Most of us dread them, yet they've been part of our life. This is part of human history since ancient times. But here's the question that often divides opinions among believers. Is paying taxes biblical? If so, how can we reconcile biblical principles with the complex and sometimes frustrating tax system we encounter today? I promise you, by the end of this episode, you will have a deeper understanding of what Scripture really says about taxes, and maybe even with some clarity on what Christian stewardship in this area looks like. Stick around. You won't want to miss this. I will talk about 3 segments today. Segment number 1, what does the Bible say about taxes? And segment number 2, the tension between biblical taxes and modern day systems. And step number 3, biblical steps for believers. But before I continue, let me ask you for a favor, a huge favor, to please support this channel. Please like, share, and hit that notification bell for future videos like this. Now, let's get back to the message. Let's start with segment number 1. What does the Bible really say about taxes? To begin, let's look at one of the most well-known passages about taxes, and that can be found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22. Here, the Pharisees tried to trap Jesus by asking him a loaded question. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? They thought they had cornered him. If he said yes, it might upset the Jewish people under Roman rule who despise these taxes. If he said no, he'd risk accusations of rebellion against Rome. Then, what does Jesus do? He asks for a denarius, the coin used to pay the tax, and he asks a simple question. Whose image is this? The answer? Caesar's. And then he delivers that famous line, give to Caesar what's Caesar's, and to God what's God. Here, Jesus makes 2 things clear. First, paying taxes, even to an imperfect, perhaps even corrupted government, is not unscriptural. Secondly, Jesus reminds us that while the government may require our finances, God requires our hearts and ultimate allegiance. This distinction is crucial. Paul amplifies this teaching in Romans 13. He writes, give everyone what you owe him. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. When Paul wrote these words, Nero, one of the most brutal emperors in history, sat on the Roman throne. Even under his tyranny, believers were called to pay taxes because the governing authorities, however flawed, are instituted by God. Obedience to God includes honoring our earthly responsibilities even when they feel burdensome. And now that leads us to segment number 2, the tension between biblical taxes and modern systems. Now, here's where things get a little complex. The Bible speaks clearly about two specific forms of taxation. One is head taxes and two is poll taxes. For example, in Exodus 30, every man over 20 was required to pay a tax, a flat amount that was equal for everyone. There is no percentage-based income tax or property tax in biblical law. According to Walter C. Jr. Kaiser, he highlights in his analysis of the Old Testament economic system, he points out that the absence of property taxes wasn't arbitrary. It reflected the sacredness of land as a divine inheritance. Land wasn't just an asset to be taxed, it was a trust from God. Here's the tension. Modern systems have added layers of taxations, including the much debated property tax. Kaiser powerfully described property tax as a form of civil robbery. Why? Because it turns what should be permanent ownership into something temporary and conditional. Think about it. You may work hard to pay off your home, but if you can't keep up with property taxes, you could lose it. It blurs the line between ownership and rent. Now, some might ask, if this isn't biblical, why do we obey these laws? The answer lies in the democratic systems under which most of us live. While we respect and obey governing authorities, as Paul instructs, we also have the privilege and responsibility to advocate for laws that align more closely with biblical values. If you believe property tax, or any tax for that matter, deviate from what is just, the ballot box is where your voice is heard. Now, segment number 3, practical steps for believers. So, where does this leave us? Here's the practical takeaway for every believer. First, obey the law. Pay your taxes honestly, as Paul commands in Romans 13. Jesus himself paid the temple tax, a gesture of obedience, even when it wasn't ideal. Number 2, use every legal opportunity to reduce your burden. Claim tax deductions, shelter savings where it is ethical to do so. Let me repeat, where it is ethical to do so, and work with professionals to manage your finances in a way that honors both God and country. Finally, engage in a democratic process. If certain tax laws feel unjust, educate yourself on candidates and policies and take prayerful actions by voting. For example, if property tax disproportionately impact vulnerable communities or churches, support leaders who prioritize reform on these issues. Remember, it's not just about law or politics. It's about fulfilling your God-given role as a steward of His resources and a voice for His principle in this world. I hope today's conversation gave you insights into the biblical perspective on taxes and how you and I can faithfully serve God while navigating modern systems. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think taxes today align with biblical teachings, or is there room for reform? I'd love to hear your feedback. Leave a comment below or send me a message or share this episode with anyone who could use some clarity on a subject that touches us all. Until then, keep seeking wisdom, stay faithful, and remember, everything we have, including what we owe, ultimately belongs to God. Thank you and take blessings. Don't forget to like or share. May God bless you. Thank you.